You can feel it before you open your eyes. The cold. It seeps through the animal skin beneath you, through the ground, into your bones. Your breath rises in small white clouds above your face. Somewhere outside, the wind is howling across an open plain that stretches farther than you can imagine. Treeless, pale, locked under a sky the color of ash. You are not in a story. You are not in a nightmare. This is Earth, 20,000 years ago, at the peak of the last ice age, and it is cold in a way you have never experienced and never will. Average temperatures across much of Europe and Asia were between 10 and 20 degrees Celsius colder than today. The British Isles were buried under glaciers more than a kilometer thick. The Sahara was not sand. It was stone and tundra. Sea levels were 120 meters lower than they are right now. Entire landscapes that exist today were simply gone, replaced by sheets of ice that took thousands of years to form. And your ancestors were out there, not huddled in a cave waiting to die, surviving, moving, hunting, raising children, burying their dead. How? That question has fascinated researchers for decades. And the answers, pulled from frozen soil and ancient campsites and the chemical signatures inside old bones, are stranger and more sophisticated than most people expect. The first answer is the most obvious, and also the one people most underestimate: fire. Not the fire you make with a lighter or even with a match. Fire that your ancestors made with their hands, from materials they carried with them, in conditions where a failed attempt meant freezing to death. We have evidence of controlled fire use going back at least 1 million years from a site in South Africa called Wonderwerk Cave, where researchers found burned bone fragments and ash layers embedded deep in sediment that has not been disturbed since. More recently, fire-making tools from sites across Europe suggest that by the time the Ice Age peaked, humans were not discovering fire. They were carrying it. Transporting embers wrapped in wet bark or damp moss, keeping a coal alive across days of travel, the way you might charge a phone before a long flight. But fire alone is not enough. You cannot carry a bonfire on your back across a frozen steppe. Clothing is what saved them, and not just clothing, engineered clothing. Ian Gilligan, a researcher at the University of Sydney who has spent years studying the thermal demands of prehistoric humans, has argued that complex, tailored clothing was not a luxury. It was a biological necessity. A human body without insulation in Ice Age temperatures loses heat faster than it can generate it. You would die in hours. So the question is not whether ancient humans wore clothing, it is how good that clothing actually was. The evidence from Sunghir, a burial site in Russia dated to roughly 34,000 years ago, is one of the most striking finds in all of human prehistory. Researchers excavating the site found the remains of 2 children buried together, head to head. Around their bodies, preserved as stains in the soil, were thousands of small ivory beads, more than 5,000 on one child alone. The beads had been sewn onto clothing. The pattern of their arrangement tells researchers that the garments were tailored, fitted at the wrists, at the ankles, across the chest. These were not draped skins, these were constructed garments cut and shaped for the human body, the same way a jacket is shaped today. There were also needles, bone needles, some no thicker than a toothpick, found at Ice Age sites across Europe and Asia. Olga Soffer, an archaeologist at the University of Illinois, has documented evidence suggesting that prehistoric humans were not just sewing fur, they were weaving plant fibers into cloth, producing layered garments that trapped air between them. Air is one of the best natural insulators in the world. Every puffer jacket you have ever owned works on the same principle. Your ancestors figured this out without any formal education, without any written instructions, by watching the cold, by testing what worked, by inheriting knowledge from every generation that survived before them. But clothing and fire still do not tell the whole story, because the Ice Age was not a single bad winter. It lasted for tens of thousands of years, with fluctuations and temporary warm periods, but with a sustained, grinding cold that shaped everything. Where people could go, what animals they could hunt, how far they could travel before the next shelter. The answer to long-term survival was not any single tool, it was architecture. Not architecture the way you think of it. Not stone buildings, not engineered structures, but deliberate shelters. At a site called Mezhyrich in Ukraine, archaeologists discovered the remains of shelters built almost entirely from mammoth bones. Massive femurs, jawbones, and tusks arranged into dome-shaped frames, likely covered with skins and insulating material. The site dates to around 15,000 years ago. It was not a temporary camp. It was a place people returned to, a base, a home, built from the bones of the largest animals on the frozen landscape. Think about what that means. These humans did not just kill mammoths for food. They planned ahead. They processed the bones, transported them, stacked them with architectural intention. They were solving a problem the way an engineer solves a problem, with the materials available under extreme constraints to a standard that had to be good enough or you died. And inside those shelters, something else was happening. Something that no amount of fur or fire or bone architecture could replace. Body heat, shared sleeping, extended families, hunting groups, multi-generational clusters of people sleeping pressed together under layered skins. Research into the thermal efficiency of human body heat in insulated spaces suggests that even a small group of 4 to 6 people sleeping together can raise the temperature inside an enclosed shelter by several degrees. In an Ice Age winter, those degrees were the margin between life and death. You did not survive the Ice Age alone. No one did. The people who survived were the people who stayed close to each other, who shared their warmth, who woke in the night and added fuel to the fire before the embers died, who sewed better seams so that the cold could not find a gap. There is something else worth understanding. The cold did not only kill through temperature, it killed through food scarcity, through dehydration, ice is not water until you melt it, and through the invisible accumulation of small failures, a torn seam, a lost fire starter, a hunt that came back empty for the 3rd day in a row. Your ancestors lived inside a system of constant vigilant maintenance. Checking clothing every day, monitoring fire, watching the sky for weather changes, tracking animal migration routes across frozen plains. The Gravettian peoples of Ice Age Europe, the cultural group that built the Sunghir burials, ranged across thousands of kilometers of frozen landscape with a degree of geographic knowledge and logistical planning that researchers are still trying to fully understand. They were not primitive. They were not stumbling through the cold hoping to get lucky. They were highly specialized, cognitively sophisticated, deeply experienced people, shaped by 1,000,000 years of ancestors who had faced the same cold and found a way through. Here is what stays with you. When temperatures drop today and you pull on a jacket, the core principle of that jacket, trapped air, layered insulation, tailored fit, was worked out in bone needle workshops beside Ice Age campfires by people whose names we will never know. When you feel the warmth of another person and move closer without thinking, you are doing what your body learned to do long before history began. The cold has always been there, and something in you has always known exactly what to do about it.